He lived quietly in his home on the east side of New London, a city on Earth that never truly slept. His days were filled with trade meetings, silent negotiations, and coded transmissions across the interplanetary network. To his neighbors, he was just another Earth-born man working in the busy shipping industry. They saw him leave every morning, carrying nothing more than a thin briefcase, and return late at night with the same calm expression. No one guessed the truth. Daniel Cross was one of the hidden owners of the solar trade routes. His name was buried deep in old agreements and encrypted contracts, but half of the goods flowing between Earth, Mars, and the colonies carried his invisible signature: food from Earth, metals from Mars, gases from Jupiter's moons, all of... It moved under the silent watch of Daniel and a few others like him. He didn't brag about it. He didn't need to. The stars themselves whispered his power, but Elena, his wife, never knew. She believed Daniel was only a simple trader, someone who earned enough to live comfortably, but never enough to dazzle her. She wanted more. She wanted to walk into rooms and make heads turn. She wanted to dine under the glass domes of Mars, surrounded by glittering wealth. She wanted to be seen, and Daniel, though he loved her deeply, was not enough for that dream. It happened on a Thursday evening. The sky over. New London was streaked with soft red light as the sun dipped below the horizon. Daniel returned home as always, his mind filled with coded reports about Martian mining corporations pushing for higher tariffs. He expected dinner with Elena, maybe laughter, maybe quiet moments where he could forget the endless negotiations of the day. Instead, he found 2 travel cases near the door. Elena stood in the center of the living room, dressed in a shimmering silver gown he had never seen before. Her dark hair was pinned high and her eyes sparkled, not with love, but with excitement, like someone about to board the most luxurious ship of their life. "Daniel," she said softly, almost rehearsed. "I'm leaving." Daniel set his briefcase down. He did not speak at once. He looked at her carefully, memorizing the moment, the way her lips trembled slightly, the way her hand rested on the case handle. "Where are you going?" He finally asked. "To Mars," she answered, lifting her chin. "Kaylor Vin has asked me to join him. You know who he is, don't you? One of the wealthiest industrialists in the Martian syndicate. He can give me everything I've ever dreamed of, a life among the stars, not this quiet corner of Earth." Her voice was not cruel. It was determined, like a woman cutting ties she believed were already weak. Daniel felt something twist inside his chest, but he did not let it show. He had faced Martian negotiators who would drain entire colonies for profit. He had stood in rooms where the future of thousands depended on a single word. He had learned long ago that silence was stronger than anger. "If that is your choice," he said calmly, "then I won't stop you." She blinked. Perhaps she expected shouting or begging or even tears. But Daniel simply stood there, still and steady as the earth beneath them. "Don't you care?" she asked. "Don't you realize what this means?" "I do," he answered quietly. "It means you've made your decision." For a moment, her confidence cracked. A flicker of guilt passed across her face, but she pushed it away quickly. She picked up her cases. "I hope one day you'll understand," she said. "I can't stay in a small life when a greater one is waiting for me." Daniel nodded once. "Goodbye, Elena." And that was all. She left without another word. The door closed behind her with a final sound that echoed through the house. Daniel did not chase her. He did not send messages or call her back. He stood in the silent house for a long time, his hands resting on the back of a chair, his breath slow and steady. The quiet was heavier than any storm. Later that night, he walked out onto the balcony. The city lights stretched across the horizon, a sea of glowing rivers. Above them, the stars shone cold and distant. Daniel lifted his gaze, and in that moment, the pain in his chest turned into something else. Not anger, not despair, just a quiet determination. He whispered to himself, "Let her go." Because Daniel knew something Elena did not. Kaelor Vin might have wealth, but Daniel had something greater. He had the roots, the hidden pathways that connected every world, every colony, every station that floated in the dark. He had built them with his own hands, with years of sacrifice and endless planning. He didn't need glittering domes or loud applause. He had the stars themselves, and if Kaelor tried to use Elena to wound him, then Kaelor would learn the truth of who Daniel Cross really was. 2 days later, Elena's shuttle launched from Earth's orbit. News reports flashed across the networks. Kaelor Vin, Martian magnate, arrives on Earth to collect his bride. Pictures showed Elena stepping into a golden vessel, her smile radiant as cameras captured every angle. People whispered about her luck, about her future among Martian elites. Daniel saw the images too. He watched without expression. He simply closed the screen and returned to his work. He received encrypted transmissions from the other route masters, figures, hidden in the shadows of commerce. They spoke of Martian mining companies tightening their grip, raising prices, and starving Earth colonies of essential metals. They warned of a coming storm. Daniel listened. He read every report, and inside something steady grew stronger. Meanwhile, Elena's new life began under the red skies of Mars. At first, it was everything she imagined. Kaelor's mansion sat beneath a dome of crystal glass, overlooking the great Martian canyons. Servants carried her belongings, and Martian elites welcomed her with practiced smiles. She walked through halls of marble and crystal, dined on rare fruits imported from Jupiter's moons, and wore gowns woven with shimmering metals. She believed she had stepped into a dream, but dreams often carry shadows. She soon noticed how Kaelor's voice turned sharp when she asked questions. How Martian noblewomen whispered behind fans when she entered the room. How her earth-born accent made her sound less refined among Kaelor's circle. Still, she told herself it was worth it. She had chosen wealth. She had chosen power. She had chosen a man whose name commanded fear across Mars. Back on Earth, Daniel's name commanded something far greater, though Elena did not know it yet. One evening, Daniel sat in his study, surrounded by maps of trade lanes stretching from Earth to Saturn. His closest ally, a woman named Mira Solon, appeared on the holoscreen. She was sharp-eyed, a strategist among the hidden masters. "Kaelor is moving," she said. "He's pushing for a monopoly on Martian exports. If he succeeds, half the colonies will starve for resources." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his face calm. "Then we won't let him succeed." Mira studied him for a moment. "Elena chose him, didn't she?" Daniel did not flinch. "Yes." "Does it matter?" "No," Daniel said. His eyes hardened, not with bitterness, but with resolve. "The roots matter. Humanity's future matters, nothing else." And in that quiet voice, he set the course of everything that would follow. When Daniel finally closed his eyes that night, the house was still empty. Elena's laughter no longer echoed in the halls. Her clothes no longer hung in the wardrobe. The silence pressed in, heavy and unyielding. But Daniel Cross was not a man who broke easily. He was a man who built silently, who carried power like a hidden flame. And as he drifted into sleep, the stars outside his window seemed to shine brighter, as if they too knew the truth. A storm was coming, and Daniel Cross was ready to face it. Daniel Cross still walked the streets of New London as if nothing had changed. He still carried his thin briefcase, still stopped at the same corner cafe for a cup of dark coffee, still nodded politely at his neighbors. To the world, he looked like a man whose life had not been shaken, but inside him something had shifted. The absence of Elena was heavy, yes, but the weight was not only from her departure. It was from the silence of secrets pressing against him, the secrets he carried as one of the hidden masters of the solar trade routes. He had always balanced two lives, the ordinary face of a trader and the unseen hand that guided ships across the void. Now, with Elena gone, that balance felt thinner, more fragile. Because while Elena chased a dream of wealth on Mars, Daniel could sense a shadow rising there, a shadow shaped by Kalor Vin and the Martian Syndicate. One evening, Daniel sat in his study. The room was dim, the glow of holomaps painting shifting lines across the walls. Trade routes spread before him like veins of light, stretching from Earth to Mars, out to Jupiter's moons, and beyond. Each line carried more than goods, it carried life itself. As he studied the flow, his comlink buzzed, a coded signal. Only a few in the galaxy knew that frequency. He pressed it open. Mira Solon appeared in the air above his desk. Her sharp eyes gleamed under the blue light. "Daniel," she said, "the Council of Route Masters has called a meeting. Urgent." Daniel's brow lifted slightly. "When?" "Now." "They're waiting." The Council of Route Masters was not known to the public. No news networks spoke their names. No history books carried their faces. They were shadows, owners, founders, and silent guardians of the trade that kept humanity alive. Without them, Earth would wither, Mars would choke on its pride, and the colonies would starve. Daniel entered the meeting through secure hollow channels. One by one, figures appeared around him, sitting in a circle of light. Each had a code name. Each voice altered slightly to hide identity. But Daniel knew them well. They had built this hidden empire together. Mira was already seated. Others followed. Iron Hand, Navigator, Cinder. The last to appear was Archivist, the eldest among them, a man who carried the memory of every route agreement since the first ships left Earth. "Brothers and sisters," Archivist began, his voice low, "we face a storm. Mars is moving." Hollow screens flickered to life, showing charts and numbers. Mining exports from Mars had spiked in cost. Shipments were delayed at Martian ports. Smaller colonies were already suffering shortages. "It is Kalor Vin," Mira said coldly. "He has gathered the syndicate around him. He promises them control of the solar economy if they give him full power. He wants a monopoly." Daniel's jaw tightened, though his voice was calm. "That would cripple Earth and the outer colonies. He will hold every world hostage." Iron Hand's voice rumbled through the channel. "We cannot allow it. But the question is, how do we stop him?" For a moment, silence filled the chamber of light. Each of them knew the danger. The syndicate was powerful, wealthy, and ruthless. If Kalor gained control of the trade lines, even the route masters would struggle to resist. Finally, Archivist spoke. "We must step out of the shadows. Daniel, you are the strongest among us. Your roots cover half the system. If Kalor is to be stopped, it must be you who acts." Daniel sat still, his eyes on the glowing maps before him. He thought of Elena's smile as she boarded Kalor's golden ship. He thought of the pride in Kalor's eyes, the arrogance. He thought of the colonies that would starve if nothing was done. "I did not build these routes for war," he said softly. "No," Mira answered, "but if you do not act, Kalor will use them for chains." The council watched him in silence. Daniel's hand hovered over the map, tracing a line from Earth to Mars. He could see the storm forming already. At last he nodded. "Then I will act." The Iron Horizon, Daniel's flagship freighter, lifted from Earth's docks 3 days later. To most eyes, it looked like a simple cargo vessel, long, gray, and unremarkable. But inside, it was a fortress. Hidden compartments carried advanced navigation systems, encryption arrays, and defense turrets that could unfold like steel wings. Daniel stood on the bridge, watching the earth shrink behind him. His crew moved with quiet efficiency, each one loyal, each one sworn to secrecy. They knew who Daniel truly was, and they followed him without question. As the ship slid into the black sea of space, Daniel's mind was calm. He was not chasing Elena. He was not even chasing Kalor. He was guarding the balance that kept humanity alive, but fate has a way of tying threads together. On Mars, Elena was learning the true face of her new life. At first, Kalor had been charming. He showered her with gifts, paraded her through the grand halls of Martian domes, and introduced her as his prized companion. She was dazzled, and for a time she convinced herself she had made the right choice. But soon she began to notice the cracks. Kalor rarely listened when she spoke. He was often gone, locked in meetings with syndicate leaders. When he was present, his words were sharp, his patience thin. He demanded her presence at galas not as a partner, but as a jewel to display. The Martian noblewomen whispered behind her back. They called her Earthborn, as if it were a stain. The men treated her with polite indifference, speaking around her rather than to her. Elena smiled in public, but in private she felt the walls closing in. She had chosen wealth, yes, but wealth came with chains. One night she overheard Kalor speaking with his advisors. She had risen quietly from bed, walking past the grand chamber doors when their voices carried through the crack. "Daniel Cross," one advisor said. "He still holds too many roots. If he chooses to resist—" Kalor's laugh was sharp. "Cross? He is nothing, a common traitor. His wife abandoned him for me. He has no power left. Soon his name will vanish, like dust under Martian winds." Elena froze. The name struck her like a stone. Daniel. Her Daniel. She pressed her hand to the doorframe. Her breath caught. Had she truly abandoned a man the Martians still feared? But Kalor's words soothed her fear, at least for the moment. If Kalor dismissed him, perhaps Daniel truly was powerless. And yet somewhere deep in her heart, a seed of doubt took root. Back aboard the Iron Horizon, Daniel began his quiet war. He did not send fleets or armies. He used something far more powerful: control. Shipments Kalor needed were delayed, redirected, or lost. Prices in Martian markets shifted overnight, draining syndicate profits. Cargo lanes twisted like rivers under Daniel's unseen hand, leaving Kalor's networks grasping at shadows. Each move was silent, precise, and devastating. The syndicate grew restless. Investors whispered, miners complained, colonies questioned Kalor's promises. And through it all, Kalor searched for the enemy but found only smoke, because no one suspected Daniel Cross. To the public, he was still the quiet Earth trader who had lost his wife to a Martian tycoon. To the Council, he was the silent sword, keeping balance, and to himself he was simply a man doing what he must. One evening Mira appeared again on Daniel's comlink. "You've struck well," she said. "Kalor is bleeding profits. The syndicate grows impatient, but he will not surrender easily." Daniel nodded. His eyes were steady, though shadows lingered beneath them. "He will come for me eventually. Let him. The roots are mine." Mira studied him closely. "And Elena?" Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. He turned back to the star maps. "She made her choice. She belongs to Kalor now." But when he closed his eyes later that night, he could still see her face, still hear her voice. The wound was there, deep and unspoken. Yet he knew he could not let it guide him. He was not fighting for Elena. He was fighting for humanity's future. On Mars, Kalor's fury was growing. He slammed his fists against glass tables, shouted at his advisors, cursed the losses piling at his feet. Somewhere in the syndicate halls, rumors began to spread of a shadow king of the roots. A figure unseen, pulling strings, turning. The stars themselves against Kalor. Elena heard the whispers, too. She dismissed them at first. Just stories, she thought. But late at night, when she lay awake staring at the red sky through the dome, she could not help but wonder. Could it be Daniel? And if it was, what had she truly walked away from? The shadows were rising. The storm was near. Daniel Cross stood, in the center of it all, silent, steady, and unyielding. And though Kalor did not yet know it, the man he had mocked, the man he had stolen from, was the very one who now held the power to bring Mars to its knees. On Mars, people bowed when he walked by. The Martian syndicate gave him a seat of honor. The noble families opened their doors for him. Investors trusted his name. For years, every deal he touched turned into gold. But now something invisible was pulling his empire apart. Cargo that should have reached Martian ports never arrived. Colonies that once trusted his word began questioning him. Profits that had flowed like rivers now trickled like dry streams. Every attempt to correct the problem ended in more failure. At first, Kalor thought it was a rival trader. Then he blamed smugglers. Finally, he suspected sabotage from within his own ranks. He shouted at advisors, dismissed captains, and poured money into spies. But no answer came, and in the silence, a whisper grew stronger. The Shadow King of the Roots. Elena heard the rumors first at a syndicate gala. The hall was filled with red glass and golden light, Martian nobles swirling in long gowns and jeweled masks. Elena wore a silver dress Kalor had chosen for her, but she felt more like a decoration than a partner. The nobles drank, laughed, and traded gossip. Elena stood by the balcony, listening quietly, when two men spoke near her. They say the Shadow King has rerouted entire fleets overnight. Nonsense. No single man could do that. Then explain why Kalor's shipments vanish while Earth's still arrive on time. Someone is behind it. Elena sipped her drink, her mind racing. The words stirred something inside her. A memory, a name, Daniel. She pushed the thought away quickly. Daniel was just a trader, a man too quiet, too ordinary. He had no power, no wealth, but the whisper would not leave her. Shadow King, hidden roots, invisible control. Could it be him? Her heart argued with her mind. She wanted to believe Daniel had moved on, that he had found peace after she left. But deep down, a doubt began to bloom, growing stronger each day. Meanwhile, Daniel Cross moved his pieces with calm precision. A convoy of Martian ore headed for the outer colonies suddenly found its path redirected to Earth stations. A fleet of supply ships meant for Kalor's allies was delayed by new tariffs Daniel quietly introduced through hidden agreements. Fuel lines dried up, prices shifted. Daniel's strategy was simple: choke Kalor's profits without revealing his hand. Every move was designed to look like chance, miscalculation, or bureaucratic error. But Daniel's mind saw patterns where others saw chaos. He was not playing against Kalor alone. He was shaping the board itself. Mira Solon watched him work. From the bridge of the Iron Horizon, "You play a dangerous game," she said one evening. Daniel stood by the holomap, watching lines of light pulse across the galaxy. "It isn't a game, it's survival." Kalor would enslave the colonies with his monopoly. "I won't allow it." "And Elena?" Mira asked softly. Daniel's expression did not change. "She is part of his world now," but in the silence that followed, Daniel's hand tightened behind his back. He could not erase the image of her face, the sound of her voice, yet he buried the memory deep, where it would not guide his choices. Kalor's frustration boiled into rage. In his private chambers, he slammed his fist against a table of black stone. His advisors stood nervously at a distance, none daring to speak. They mock me, Kalor growled. The colonies whisper about a phantom while my empire crumbles. I want answers. An advisor cleared his throat. My lord, there is talk of Daniel Cross. Kalor turned sharply. The Earth Trader? The one whose wife left him for me? Yes, the advisor said carefully. Some believe he is tied to the Shadow King. His roots, his past work in trade. Kalor laughed harshly. Cross is nothing, a broken man. I took his wife, his pride. He wouldn't dare stand against me. But even as he spoke, a shadow of doubt flickered in his eyes. Life for Elena grew colder. At first, she ignored the whispers and the rumors, telling herself she had chosen wisely. But the more she saw Kalor's anger, the more she saw the truth of his world. He treated her like a prize, not a partner. The Martian nobles never accepted her as one of their own. Worse, Kalor's fortunes were failing. His temper grew short. The wealth that once dazzled her now seemed fragile, built on greed and arrogance. One evening, she sat alone by the glass dome, staring at the red sands beyond. She remembered the nights on Earth when Daniel would sit beside her on the balcony, speaking softly of the stars. He never promised riches, but he gave her peace. He gave her respect. Tears burned in her eyes, though she quickly wiped them away. She told herself she had chosen power, and power was worth the cost. But in the quiet of her heart, regret began to grow like a shadow she could not escape. On the iron horizon, Daniel prepared for his next move. Mira handed him a coded transmission. From Iron Hand, Kalor is pushing for emergency tariffs. He means to starve Earth into submission. Daniel's jaw set firmly. Then we strike faster. He keyed commands into the map. Whole fleets shifted, convoys rerouted. A web of glowing lines pulsed like veins, cutting Kalor's empire piece by piece. This is more than trade, Mira said softly. This is war. Daniel shook his head. No. War is fought with weapons. This is balance. If Kalor wins, the colonies fall. If I win, humanity survives. And if Elena sees you? Mira asked. Daniel's eyes hardened. Then she will know the truth. But it will not change what I must do. The whispers of the Shadow King grew louder. On colonies across the solar system, people spoke of him with hope. He is protecting us, miners said. He fights the Martians, farmers whispered. He keeps the roots alive, captains swore. On Mars, the same whispers filled Kalor's halls with dread. The more Kalor denied him, the more the people believed. The names spread like fire. Daniel Cross, the Shadow King of the Roots. At last, Kalor could no longer ignore it. He summoned his advisors, his allies, his captains. In a great chamber of red stone, he stood before them, his voice echoing. I will find this Shadow King, he declared. I will tear apart every trade route, every convoy, until his mask is broken. No man defies Kalor Vin and lives. His followers cheered, but their eyes carried doubt. They had seen the losses, the cracks in his empire. They knew his fury was a shield against fear. And among them, standing silent at his side, Elena lowered her gaze, hiding the storm in her heart. Because deep down, she already knew. The Shadow King was Daniel. Meanwhile, Daniel stood on the bridge of the iron horizon, the stars stretching wide before him. His crew waited for his command. The next strike would not be subtle. The time for whispers was ending. Daniel spoke calmly, his voice steady as iron. Set course for Mars. The game of shadows is over. It is time Kalor sees the truth. The ship's engines roared to life, carrying Daniel toward the heart of the storm, and so the game of power entered its final stage, not with weapons, but with will. Daniel Cross, the man abandoned by his wife, the man mocked by Martian elites, was about to show the galaxy who truly ruled the stars. Mars's grand dome glistened under the red sun, a massive structure of glass and metal stretching higher than most Earth cities could dream. Delegates from Earth, Mars, Jupiter's moons, and the outer colonies filled the chamber, their faces expectant, their eyes bright with curiosity and concern. The assembly was held once every 5 years, a time for leaders and traders to discuss the state of commerce across the solar system. But this meeting was different. This time, the assembly would witness something unprecedented: the rise of the Shadow King. Elena stood among the Martian elite, her silver gown shimmering in the bright dome lights. She had been escorted to the front row, closest to Kalor, who now paced angrily near the dais. His chest was tight with fury, his jaw set, hard. His empire was bleeding, and every delegate whispered about invisible hands sabotaging his trade. "They say he's here," one Martian noble whispered. Elena stiffened. She felt a strange flutter in her chest. Could it be Daniel? Surely not. He had no reason to appear in front of all these elites. He was a traitor, invisible, hidden. Yet the rumors had grown louder, stronger. Meanwhile, Daniel Cross approached the assembly quietly. He had traveled aboard the Iron Horizon, docking in Mars's orbital station under the cover of early morning light. To any observer, he appeared calm, a quiet man from Earth, carrying a small briefcase and wearing the plainest of suits. There was no armor, no fleet, no display of power, only Daniel. The shuttle carrying him descended slowly into the grand dome. Delegates whispered, recognizing a familiar face, but none suspected the truth. Not yet. Inside, Daniel's mind was steady. This was not about revenge. It was not about Elena, though she had been a thread in the story. This was about justice, about balance, about ensuring that Kalor and his syndicate could not starve the colonies into submission. And if Kalor was arrogant enough to mock him publicly, Daniel would let the truth speak louder than any words. The assembly began. Mars's speaker, a tall figure in crimson robes, called the meeting to order. Delegates stood as he spoke of trade, profits, tariffs, and shortages. Kalor rose, presenting his case, pointing fingers at traders on Earth, blaming delays on incompetence, bad planning, and smugglers. The room was tense. Every eye was on him. Every word carried weight. Every pause felt dangerous. Then, from the back of the chamber, a single voice cut through the noise. "Excuse me, Speaker, may I have a word?" All heads turned. Daniel Cross stepped forward. Simple, quiet, almost ordinary. No one recognized him immediately. Kalor scowled. "Who is this?" he demanded. "This is a meeting of legitimate traders and leaders. Who dares interrupt?" Daniel's voice was calm, steady, unwavering. "I am Daniel Cross, and I control half the solar trade routes you rely on, Kalor." A hush fell over the assembly. Delegates murmured, some exchanging startled glances. Kalor laughed sharply. "You? A simple Earth trader? You cannot be serious." Daniel opened his briefcase and tapped a few commands. Hollow screens unfolded above him, displaying contracts, trade routes, encrypted agreements, and transfer records. The numbers were undeniable. Flow lines lit up across the galaxy, showing fleets, convoys, and supply chains, all under Daniel's control. "I have been the Shadow King of the routes," Daniel said quietly. "All the shipments Kalor claims are failing. I control them. Every reroute, every delay, every redirected fleet. It was not chance. It was deliberate, to protect the colonies from a monopoly that would starve them into submission." Gasps echoed through the hall. Some delegates whispered in awe. Others stared, mouths open in disbelief. Kalor's face turned red with rage. "You dare! You have no right to claim this!" Daniel's eyes met his. Calm, steady, unflinching. "I have every right. The roots belong to no single man. They are a lifeline for all humanity. and you, Kalor, have been trying to seize them for personal gain." The room was silent. Every eye was on the man who had once seemed ordinary, now revealed as the most powerful figure in interplanetary trade. Elena could not move. She felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her. The quiet, soft-spoken man she had left, her Daniel, was not weak, not ordinary. He was a master, a guardian, a king of the roots. Her hands trembled. She looked at Kalor. His face was pale with fury. He had underestimated Daniel entirely. He had thought himself unbeatable, untouchable. And now, everything he had built was crumbling in the light of truth. Daniel continued, addressing the assembly. "Kalor, your monopolies would have destroyed colonies. I have protected Earth, Mars, and every outer settlement from your greed. This is not personal. It is about survival." He pressed a button on his console. A live feed from Mars's trade networks appeared, showing warehouses full of goods ready to be delivered, fleets redirecting in perfect timing. Supply lines flowed smoothly again. Delegates murmured with relief and astonishment. This was the proof they needed. Kalor's advisors whispered furiously, trying to regain control of the narrative. Kalor himself was speechless, his pride shattered. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She had chased glitter, wealth, and arrogance, and now she realized what she had lost. The man she had left, the man she had believed was weak, was the one keeping the galaxy alive. Daniel did not look at Elena. He did not speak to her. His mission was clear. Kalor's downfall was public, undeniable, and absolute. He turned back to Kalor. "You mocked me, humiliated me, flaunted your wealth at my expense. But it was never about you. It was about humanity. And now, the Assembly sees who truly protects it." Kalor's face twisted with anger. He tried to speak, to argue, but every word fell flat. The records, the networks, the holographic proof, all undeniable. The Martian nobles began to turn away from Kalor. Investors murmured their concerns. Colony's delegates whispered approval. His power base was cracking before him, faster than he could stop it. And in that moment, Daniel's quiet victory was complete. After the assembly, a private room was cleared for Daniel. Elena stepped forward, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. "Daniel, is it really you?" Daniel looked at her, his expression soft but firm. "Yes, Elena, it is me." Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know. I thought you were just ordinary. I left you for him, for Kalor. I didn't know." Daniel shook his head gently. "You made your choice, and now you see the truth. But this is not about blame, Elena. It is about the future of humanity. That is what mattered, and what still matters." Elena's lips quivered. I'm sorry. I never understood." Daniel did not reply with anger. He did not scold or shame her. Instead, he placed his hand briefly on her shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the past. "You chose your path," he said quietly. "I chose mine." Her face fell, understanding that some doors could never be reopened. Meanwhile, Kalor was left in disgrace. Mars leaders met him in private chambers, their expressions cold. Investors demanded answers. The colonies were openly questioning his competence. Every advantage he had relied upon had been stripped away. He realized too late that the man he had mocked, the man whose wife he had taken, was the one who truly controlled the galaxy's lifeblood, and the Martian syndicate, once loyal, began turning against him quietly, one contract at a time. Back aboard the Iron Horizon, Daniel watched Mars from orbit. The city lights stretched below, red and gold and glowing with life. He did not celebrate. This was not a victory of ego, nor revenge. It was a victory of balance, of protection, of humanity. Mira approached him, her eyes reflecting both awe and respect. "You've done it," she said softly. Daniel shook his head. "It is not done. Kalor will not stop trying, and the roots are never truly safe. But for now, the colonies are alive, and the balance remains." Mira nodded. "And Elena?" Daniel looked away toward the stars. "She will understand, eventually, or she will not. That does not matter. Because the stars had their own loyalty, the roots had their own guardians, and Daniel Cross, quiet, calm, unassuming Daniel Cross, was their king. That night, Daniel stood on the observation deck of the Iron Horizon. The galaxy stretched before him, infinite, silent, and full of potential. He touched the railing lightly, thinking of Earth, Mars, the outer colonies, and even Elena. He had lost love, yes, but he had gained purpose, respect, and a responsibility that few men could ever claim. The power was quiet, but absolute, and in the shadows of the stars, one thought remained steady in his mind. A man who builds quietly, who waits patiently, and who acts with integrity is unstoppable. The galaxy had learned that lesson, and Kalor would learn it too. Daniel Cross had revealed himself. The Shadow King of the Roots was no longer hidden, and the game of power had entered a new era. Mars's skies burned a deep red as Daniel Cross's influence became undeniable. His strategies, precise and invisible for years, were now open for all to see. Cargo moved smoothly, colonies thrived, and the Martian syndicate stumbled in chaos. Kalor Vin's empire was crumbling, and Daniel was the calm, unstoppable force orchestrating it all. And yet Daniel did not celebrate. The final confrontation was not violent. It did not need to be. Daniel's power lay not in weapons, but in control. Trade routes were life itself, and he commanded them like a king over a kingdom that stretched across the stars. Kalor had tried everything: bribes, threats, fleets of armed ships. But Daniel's reach was deeper than Mars's armies. Every cargo line Kalor controlled, Daniel could intercept. Every Martian port Kalor relied on, Daniel could reroute. He did it all silently, invisibly, with precision that left Kalor grasping at shadows. The final meeting took place in the assembly hall on Mars. Delegates filled the chamber, their faces tense. Kalor stood at the podium, his fists clenched, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He had been forced to call this meeting to explain the collapse of his empire, but he did not know what awaited him. Daniel entered quietly from the back. No one noticed him at first. No guards stopped him. He wore plain clothes, his eyes calm, his presence unassuming. Yet when he spoke, all voices fell silent. "Kalor Vin," Daniel said clearly, "your reign over the trade routes ends today." The chamber froze. Delegates exchanged glances, realizing the quiet Earth trader was now a man of unmatched power. Kalor's face turned red with fury. "You dare!" he began, but Daniel raised a hand. "I dare because the roots are not yours to control," Daniel said. "I have protected them from greed, from monopolies, from corruption. I do not fight for revenge, I fight for humanity." He pressed a button on his console. Hollow screens illuminated above the assembly, showing every shipment Kalor had controlled. Every rerouted convoy, every redirected fleet, every delay, proof of Daniel's dominance. The assembly erupted in whispers. Investors, leaders, and delegates watched in awe as Daniel demonstrated how Mars' empire could no longer bend the galaxy to its will. Kalor's advisors looked at him with shame and fear. His empire, once powerful and feared, had been dismantled, without a single shot fired. Elena watched silently from the front row. Her eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open. She could not move. The man she had left, whom she thought ordinary, was Daniel Cross, the Shadow King of the Roots, the man who had saved the galaxy from her husband's greed. For the first time, she saw clearly. She saw the strength, the patience, the quiet, wisdom that had always been hidden behind Daniel's calm demeanor. She felt a pang of regret so deep it seemed to reach her very soul. Kaelor, sensing his failure, turned to her with anger. "You see? You chose poorly. This man is nothing. He was always nothing." Elena shook her head, almost silently. "No," she whispered to herself. "He is everything I failed to understand." Daniel spoke again, addressing the assembly. "The Roots are a lifeline," he said firmly. "They are not owned by one man, nor one faction. They are a shared responsibility, a promise that humanity can survive, thrive, and expand. Kaelor, your greed endangered millions. Your monopoly threatened entire colonies. That is why I acted. That is why I control the Roots today." Gasps filled the chamber. Delegates nodded, some with tears, some with relief. Even Mars's officials who had once supported Kaelor began to bow their heads. Kaelor's face twisted in disbelief and fury. How? Daniel raised a hand again. "You underestimated what a quiet, steady hand could achieve. You mocked patience and subtlety. You believed wealth alone was power. You were wrong." The chamber remained silent. Kaelor had no words left. His empire was exposed, his control shattered. Daniel's calm authority filled every corner of the hall. After the assembly, Daniel spoke privately with the delegates, explained how the Roots would now be managed. Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies would each have oversight committees, ensuring fair trade, safety, and stability. No one faction would dominate. No one man could hold life or death over the colonies. Again, it was a system built on trust, transparency, and balance. And Daniel Cross, quiet, unassuming, brilliant, would remain the guardian of it all. Mira Solon watched him closely, a mixture of awe and respect in her eyes. "You've done more than anyone could have imagined," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "It was not for me. It was for the people who rely on these Roots every day. The lives of millions matter more than pride or revenge." Elena could not avoid him any longer. Later that evening, she found herself alone with Daniel in a quiet chamber aboard the Iron Horizon. The ship was anchored near Mars, its lights reflecting off the red sands below. She approached him cautiously, unsure what to say, unsure how he would respond. "Daniel," she began, her voice trembling. I didn't understand. I thought I was making the right choice. I thought wealth and power were everything." Daniel did not interrupt. He listened silently, his face calm. "I was wrong," Elena admitted, tears in her eyes. You were always stronger than I knew. Smarter, better. I left you for nothing." Daniel's expression softened, but his voice remained steady. "You made your choice. That is your path. I do not blame you." "You must live with it as I live with mine," she nodded, swallowing hard. I see now. I see who you are, who you always were." Daniel looked out the window at Mars. "It is too late for what we had, Elena. But that does not matter. What matters is what comes next. Humanity is safe. The colonies are thriving. The routes are protected. That is what counts." Elena nodded, tears streaming silently. She understood. She could not change the past, but she could see the truth. Kaelor Vin's fate was sealed. He was stripped of command, removed from the syndicate's leadership, and forced to answer for his failures. Investors withdrew support. Colonies demanded reparations. His public image was shattered, and whispers of his arrogance became lessons taught in Mars academies. Daniel Cross never sought revenge. He simply ensured the balance of power. Kaelor's humiliation was the natural result of his greed and misjudgment. The galaxy slowly adjusted to Daniel's quiet rule. Earth's ports flowed smoothly, Mars' domes bustled with commerce, and the outer colonies thrived. Supplies reached, every settlement on time, prices stabilized, trade flourished, and in every hub, every station, every fleet, the name Daniel Cross became a symbol of reliability, fairness, and hidden strength. Elena watched from afar, still on Mars, still feeling the sting of her choices. She had wealth, yes, but she lacked the respect, the quiet power, the legacy Daniel had built. And in her heart, she knew she had walked away from a man who would shape the galaxy. Daniel did not chase her. He did not demand her loyalty or admiration. He remained steady, calm, and focused. The galaxy was his to guide, not for glory, but for survival and balance. One evening, aboard the Iron Horizon, Daniel stood on the observation deck, staring into the infinity of space. Stars shimmered like diamonds, silent witnesses to his journey. He breathed slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, and yet feeling the satisfaction of a mission fulfilled. The galaxy was alive. The colonies thrived. The routes were safe, and Daniel Cross, once a quiet trader from Earth, now ruled the heart of the solar trade routes. Not with violence, not with arrogance, but with wisdom, patience, and the calm certainty of a man who understood power in its truest form. Elena would remember him, yes. She would remember the quiet man who never flaunted wealth, never demanded attention, and yet held the stars in his hands. But she also knew she could never go back. Daniel's victory was complete. The crown of the roots rested on his shoulders. He was not a king in name, but in action. And the galaxy, vast and infinite, acknowledged his reign silently in every shipment, every fleet, and every heartbeat of the colonies. The Shadow King of the Roots had emerged from the quiet shadows, and the stars themselves bowed to his wisdom.